welcome to another episode of Chasing Justice. I'm your host, Synova Cantrell. Today we are going to be recording our next episode of the Peacemaker Series. We are going to be talking to ex-law enforcement around the country, seeing what they've done for their community while they were in service and what they're doing now that they've retired. And today we've got a very interesting character on the video with us. His name is Gary Jenkins. He's an ex-intelligence officer that worked on helping take down some different factions of the mafia in Kansas City, Missouri. And now he's an author and a documentary producer, and he's also written some books, and he's the host of the Gangland Wire Podcast. Welcome, Gary. How are you?
Well, I'm happy to be here, Synova. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's hard to get all of your stuff in. It's like, how do you put a bio in, 30 seconds when you've done so much?
Well, I get bored easily.
Well, I like one of my coaches, his name's Joe Vitale, and he's written 80 different books and workbooks and things. And he just, when someone introduces him, they're just like, Joe Vitale, guru, speaker, blah, blah, blah. And they said, author of too many books to mention here. And that's what I thought of when I was trying to get all of your stuff crammed in. So let's go back to the beginning. What made you want to be in law enforcement in the first place?
Oh, well, as I tried to tell him at the time, because I want to help people. Mm-hmm. Although in retrospect, I don't know if that's really why I was working at a factory job. I did not go to college right out of high school, and found a job in a factory, building Ford Mavericks at the end. And it was boring. It was crushingly boring, but, I got married early and I had a little kid, and, we had insurance and a steady paycheck, and it was, it was good money. It was for best, working automotive factory is the highest paying job for a person without a college education or without a trade, I think there is. And so I don't know if it's still that way now. It probably is. I think they still make pretty good money, but anyhow, I hated it. I hated every minute of it. And, Kansas City Police Department came up with a program to hire 350 new officers, and there was advertisements all over the place, and they did the first cops that anybody ever saw. They rode along with a guy one night and did a short, like a 15 or 20-minute edited down version, and threw it on the local TV. One night, and I watched that, and I thought, that looks like fun. and we all want to be the hero of our own story, and cops are, at least have a chance to be a hero. I didn't have a chance to be a hero out at the Ford Motor Plant, I'll tell you right now. So, I quit. I caught a lot of grief from other guys. They said, well, you're an idiot. Why would you want to do that? Because union guys are not usually big on cops. Cops, the only thing they knew about cops is they write you DUIs and speeding tickets. And so, and that was kind of my opinion about cops at that point in time. But, it did sound a lot better than working at the Ford plant. And they were hiring and TV and had a lot of hero cops on there, and the detectives, of course, like every young guy, I wanted to be a detective and work undercover and things like that immediately. But so I came on the police department and took a little bit of a pay cut, actually. Best decision I ever made. But they say if you like what you do, then you never have to work a day in your life. And in my case, that's true. And a lot of guys I know that is definitely true. So. I got on, went to the academy, and came out and did my 2 years or so, 2.5 years in patrol, doing those things that I didn't really want to do, writing traffic tickets and wearing a uniform, driving a patrol car around. But, you're always able to find a little bit of adventure on that job. So that's kind of why I came on. I don't know. I suppose I helped some people, but I look back, it really was a desire for action, if I'm honest with myself.
Yeah, got to have some excitement in your life. I'm one of those. I don't have enough attention span to work at a factory, unless I was working in the department where you could smash things. then I might be able to enjoy that for a little bit.
Oh my God.
Be like, can I, I watch those shows, those home makeover shows, and I'm like, there's something wrong with me when I enjoy the fact when they go in there with an axe and they smash it. I'm like, that looks like the exciting part to me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to do with the other stuff. Just hire somebody to do that. So how did you go from patrolman to intelligence officer?
First of all, you got to get noticed by people. You got to establish a reputation on a job like that to start moving around. There's some people that just move around through the civil service system, and by political contacts, you make friends that get promoted on up, and will bring you along with them. And I didn't have any friends like that particularly, but I kind of distinguished myself when I was in patrol. Worked a really high crime area, and I was the kind of guy that went out and went the extra mile and dug up some kind of cool stuff that detectives downtown and my commanders noticed that, hey, this guy, he knows what he's doing. They formed a thing called the Field Investigation Unit at every station. At the time, there was no detectives in the station. All the detective units were centralized at headquarters downtown. They wanted to have a detective unit in the station to handle residential burglaries and small larcenies and things like that, things that really affected the people out there, as opposed to murder, rape, and robbery and commercial burglaries and safe jobs and all that. Because there was a ton of residential burglaries. Of course, I was in the middle of the city, and there's always a lot of residential burglaries. And so they formed it in order to do that. A lot of resistance from the downtown people, but we had we had a pretty strong commander at the time, and he pushed it. And he got himself a field investigation unit, 5 guys, I think, or 4 guys, and a sergeant on each watch of the 3 watches. We even had a dog watch. They changed that back to just days and evenings after a while. So we started working residential burglaries, started wearing suits to work, and figured out how to create all the systems with no help from downtown. They always resisted this downtown. Even the old time detectives, they saw us a little incursion on their territory, and they weren't doing anything about residential burglaries anyhow, unless somebody just handed them a suspect and
Right.
all the evidence in hand. They didn't go out and talk to anybody, try to dig up any witnesses. And
Right.
so that's what we did. We get the reports, and if there looked like there was any witnesses or there'd been any processing done to the scene, why we try to kind of figure out who the kids were in the neighborhood that might have done those burglaries. Because usually your burglar in a neighborhood comes from somewhere around where you live, not too far away.
Right.
And then you start digging up witnesses and start creating sources out in the neighborhood. My first good informant I ever got was a residential burglar that we caught on the second go around. He decided he would really truly be an informant on that second one when I helped him get a diversion from prosecution. I never forget, this kid was Larry McDonald, and I'm just a young policeman. I'm like 28 years old, and I don't know what I'm doing particularly other than what they do on TV, I think. But they made Larry McDonald on a residential burglary somewhere within 4 or 5 blocks of his house. And he was one of those typical kids. He lived with his grandmother, no mother or father anywhere around, and she was raising him by herself, and she was old, and he was just running the streets. He wasn't going to school. And we let him go once. He promised he'd snitch. We didn't really have a very good case on him, but we marked him as this kid. He's doing the deal in this particular 8 or 10 square block area. And so I'll never forget, the district officers caught him running out of a house. They got a call on prowlers. Caught him running out of the house. They snagged him up, and after a foot chase, they caught him. They brought him in the station, and they kind of knew that one of these district guys knew that I was the one that let him go before, but I didn't really have a case anyhow. But they don't understand that. Street policemen don't really understand that. They think if you arrest somebody that you put them in jail, and they're in jail, forever. and it's not like that.
Right.
So
Problem solved.
Yeah, problem solved. and if you didn't keep him in jail as a detective, then there's something wrong with you. So
Right,
I mean, that's the system, and it's like that in all kinds of work, I think. So I'll never forget, they brought that kid, drug him back in the station in handcuffs and threw him into our office, and he said, and this one policeman, his name was Barnes, he said, here, there you go, there's your buddy. So I said, oh, Larry.
You're
So
funny.
we do all the paperwork, and they had it. We had a case this time.
Yeah.
We wanted to charge him. And we did. We booked him in and sent him downtown to headquarters, held him overnight, and then we go down to headquarters. The process is you see people doing the perp walk whenever the news cameras are there. Well,
Right.
the process is you arrest somebody. Usually the newspapers don't know about it.
Right.
And you process them through and you send them to central detention. Then you have to take them to the courthouse, which many times is across the street from the police station where the central detention is. And that's when news people find out about it. Of course, there weren't any news people waiting on us, but we went down, they got Larry McDonald out and got him all ready, and I brought him downstairs and sat down with him just to talk to him a few minutes before we went across the street. And he's hyperventilating. He's so scared to go to county jail because he doesn't have anybody to post his bond. He knows he's going upstairs and into the big jail, the big boys jail. And he was just 17, about 17 and a half at the time. Always before he'd gotten caught, he'd been a juvenile under 17. And, they'd release him to his grandmother and then they'd go to juvenile court. Well, it's different this time, and every kid on the street knows that. So he's hyperventilating. He does not want to go up to that central jail. He's, I'll snitch. I'll do whatever you want. And I took a chance on him. When we go across the street, we talked to the prosecutor, and I said, here's the deal. He's never been arrested before as an adult. This is his first go around, and he said he's willing to do something. Can we do anything for him? He said, well, we can do a diversion, which is probably what we do in the end anyhow. As soon as he gets a public defender, they're gonna bring up the same things, and we're gonna do a diversion. So I said, okay, let's do a diversion, and I'll tell him the only reason I got a diversion is because of me. So I go back and tell him, and I said, you want to do that? You're gonna have to jump through some hoops, and you're on a probation, but if you complete this, you're not gonna have a record. So he said, that's a pretty good idea. That secretary or somebody had called the diversion people, or this guy shows up, and this was 1975, 74, 75, and he had long hair, like a hippie. A lot of hippies had long hair back then, and he walks in, and he must have smoked a joint just on the way to headquarters because he had that long hair anyhow, and inside of his car, and he just reeked of marijuana smoke. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So we turned Larry McDonald over the dope smoking probation officer. He takes him under wing, and they go on and a little slice of life into the big city criminal justice system there. But Larry does start telling me about other kids that are burglarizing he hears about, and it's good information. And he worked for me for a long time, and finally I left the intelligence unit, and I could even send him into places. And I said, these guys hanging out down here on the corner, go down there and hang around and see what's the scam, what are they doing, and who are they? And he'd do that kind of thing for me. We actually became friends in many ways, and even more than I realized, because 25 years later, I get a call from an off-duty policeman. They said, did you ever know a guy named Larry McDonald? And I said, oh yeah, I know Larry. They said, well, he just wanted to let you know that he turned his life around and he'd done good, and he'd like to talk to you. And I said, well, I'll give him my phone number. Well, but he calls me, and he's been working. He started out working for the city. He did that for about like 10 or 15 years. Then he got a chance to get a work as the building maintenance guy for a big synagogue here in the city. And he was the head building maintenance guy for a big synagogue in the city. And he's 57 years old and has his own family and never got in trouble again. So,
Awesome.
all's well that ends well. I was happy to hear that. I was happy to hear that.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed my plan was for the Peacemaker series to talk about ex-law enforcement, but come to find out after I got him on the video, he's actually still technically law enforcement. He's over the whatever the unit's called for the Springfield School District. So he's actually he runs a specialty unit of uniformed officers in the school systems. And we were talking about how people want to think that law enforcement, they're only there to catch you when you're speeding or doing something you're not supposed to do, but in reality, there's a lot of times where you make a difference in somebody's life, and then you become that, if this kid didn't have any parents, you were a guidepost that if you hadn't stepped in and somebody else had, and he'd just gone to jail, he'd have probably, learned a whole lot more than he really needed to know behind bars, and went on to be a career criminal, so that's what I like to hear. You never know how many people you've touched and changed their course in life, and so I think that's wonderful. He needed that guidance, and he wasn't getting it at home. And so people need to understand law enforcement does a lot more than get you in trouble when you do something you're not supposed to do. They're there for more than just that. But this gentleman, I'm going to hook you two up, because you guys might do some videos together. I don't know what content you would want to do, but his name's Jim Farrell. And he was ex-law enforcement for Springfield Police, and then he became I think he's lead detective, or I don't know what his actual title is now, but he's got a podcast called No BS with Jim Farrell.
Oh, really? Huh? Interesting.
Yeah, and it's doing really good. And he just interviews all kinds of people that he's known and do interesting things. And I told him about you during the video, so now it's your turn to hear about him, and we'll get to it. But that's what I think it's interesting to see how you progress, because so many people, they won't step out of their comfort zone and leave the factory job in the first place. And so
that's for sure.
That takes a lot of courage that a lot of people, they just don't have it within them to say, this is safety, but this is what I want to do. And I think that's a really good life lesson, if you want to call it that, to step outside of your comfort zone. And so many people do what they hate to do. They will stay in the factory job and hate every moment of it, because that's what they feel like they have to do. They don't step out because society kind of conditions us to, like you said, you were married, you already had a kid, and and you're the man of the house, and you're supposed to support, and sometimes that's kind of hard to do. So I think that's wonderful that you were able to do that. Now, as an intelligence officer, I know you worked on some of the Kansas City mafia. Can you give us some stories and tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. I went to the intelligence unit in 1976, which was at a time when we had two major things going on in organized crime in Kansas City. Actually, I guess three. One of them was Sub Rosa, if you will, was under. We didn't really know anything about it when I first started. Everybody kind of knew it was going on. That was a skimming from Las Vegas Casino was coming to Kansas City. But also we had this district. It was called the River Key. It was like an entertainment district that a man had started just on his own dime. He was a businessman, had a little money, and this was in an area right next to City Market, in an area back in the early 70s. People were leaving Kansas City. They were moving way out to the suburbs, filling in out in the suburbs, and fleeing the city, really. Downtown was dying, and it's only come back. It's never come back like it was, but they had like 2 or 3 major department stores. There was only one left by this point in time, and it closed during this time. Businesses were moving out of downtown, and there was no new construction going on. No, people just kind of were just letting it die out. And this guy started renting or leasing and buying old brick buildings, old turn of the century brick buildings that were down this area that was adjacent to downtown, and just right next to the old City Market. The early Kansas City. All the government buildings had been down here back in the turn of the century. And then he started fixing them up, but he didn't really fix them up like brand new buildings. He just kind of glossed them up a little bit and used exposed brick and rafters and beams and everything, something that became immensely popular later on, and started leasing things out at reasonable rates to young people to start new restaurants, and to artists could rent galleries there real inexpensively, and small other small stores. There was a small jewelry store started, just off of that by an individual, and art gallery, little clothing boutiques, boutique clothing stores down there, and the restaurants started going, and of course you always get a liquor license to start a restaurant, and young people started going down there. This was kind of the first of the transition from Kansas City. Up till that point in time had been diners or steakhouse, or maybe a family restaurant. That was it. And so these young people, they started places that were hip and cool. They're like, this one was 20 different kinds of omelets, Papa Nick's, and they just made omelets with all different kinds of ingredients. You just choose them. Nobody ever heard anything like that in Kansas City. One guy started a hamburger place, and he had about 10 or 15 different toppings he would put on the hamburgers. And so there was an Italian place opened up. There was a deli. We didn't have delis in Kansas City. We're not like an East Coast city. We're not even like St. Louis. There was one deli that I'd ever heard of, the New York deli, out in Midtown, but there was nothing downtown at that point in time. These people opened up Dinkeldorf's Deli, and they made these great big sandwiches, and they'd sell them by the inch. If you wanted, they'd make the sandwich like about 6 feet long, and then they'd chop off however many inches you wanted. They called it the Big Mother Hoagie, and you buy it by the inch. And so cool stuff like that, and it was rocking and rolling, and some mob guys wanted to move some of their bars down there because there was so much foot traffic, and all the young people were coming back in from the suburbs. It's kind of the start of the singles kind of bars. All us baby boomers were in our 20s, and hey, we want to hit the bars. We want to hook up at the bars. And so I actually had the district car down there, and I watched this grow and build when I was still in uniform, and stopped in and talked to some of the different people. Had place of it. My favorite place down there is called Ebenezer's, and it was just a great big open room, in an old brick building. And then it had an office built in the middle of it that was, just another little building sitting inside in the middle of it. There was a small office, maybe like 10 by 10. And the band sat on top of the office. And so they were up above, about 10 feet above everybody else in the joint, and they'd play up there. And they had enough room up there. It was like it was like Chicago. They had a big band. They had horns and drums and, guitars and a singer. And, it was just a cool deal. But these mob guys, they were getting booted out because of some urban planning, urban remodeling to put in a new hotel downtown. They wanted to move down there. And so there was a guy down there who knew who they were, and knew that he was a son of a mob associate. So he knew who these guys were, and he knew what they were going to bring with them. Mm-hmm. They were going to bring the rough trade. They were going to bring a different vibe to this area that had been a family thing, and during the day, and a young people's singles bars at night that was nice. No B-girls like these guys had downtown. That's one from my friend described. He says, he said they thought you made money at a bar by hiring 50-year-old whores to sell watered down drinks to truck drivers. And so that they were going to bring that vibe, and he fought them like crazy, and the mob, they knew the Savellas and the Camisanos was kind of Willie Camisano was kind of not an underboss, but he had a big crew. He was an important mobster. He didn't have any titles right next to the boss, because he was called Willie the Rat, and that was for a reason. He was mean. He was violent, and people feared him. Mm-hmm. And the boss, Nick Savella, he was much more well-read and thoughtful, and did not like to take any kind of actions unless they're really well thought out. And he really did not want to participate or order any violence unless it was really well thought out and there's real reason for it. Willie
Right.
Jr. or Willie Comisano was not like that. He was not that guy. If you got in his way, why, you better hang on. And he ended up killing the father of this one guy that was kind of ratting him out to liquor control, trying to stop these liquor licenses, because a lot of those liquor license people were really associates that were or kind of beholden to him, that were, you would say, were maybe part of his crew, that were kicking up to him a little bit. And his brother was one of these guys that had these strip clubs from West 12th Street that wanted to move down. And so that just kind of, that whole thing blew up. A building blew up down there. They killed 2 or 3 people as that. So I step into the middle of this, and the Bureau's working frantically on it. It's in the headlines. And so what we do in the intelligence unit is, because we don't have wiretap capabilities, we don't really, in Jackson County, the county I'm in, it was at that point in time, especially in any point in time on a local level, it's hard to bring cases against organized crime people. The feds can do it because they've got witness protection, they've got RICO, they've got wiretap laws, they've got all the tools, which local police departments usually don't have, and we didn't certainly have them at all in Kansas City. New York City has some of that, and LA, I think, but most cities don't have all those tools. Just the budget to put people in witness protection is enough right there. That no city's going to do that.
I don't think people realize that. I think people, when they hear about mafia, they think, they don't realize there's a distinction between the feds and the locals in their capabilities of doing things. They just kind of lump everybody together as they're all cops, but in reality, there's a big funding difference. There's manpower difference. And just like you said, they have the RICO law, so they even have legal differences. So there's, I think a lot of people don't make that they don't distinguish between the two.
That's true. So what we do is we help them. We're trusted. Everybody's vetted that goes in the intelligence unit. And we had a really good relationship because of that fact, because everybody had always been vetted and they felt comfortable working with us. So that we would, during that time, then they formed kind of a surveillance team. And several of us were then put on that surveillance team just to start following these guys around and really sitting on them tight to find out what they were doing, what phones they were using, where they were going, where they hung out, even more so than usual than before. And, that the Bureau was pushing their informants. And so then, we just, this spun off and off until it was unbelievable, because at the same time this was going on, there was a group of young Turks, if you will, the Spiro brothers, that's Spero, the Spiro brothers. And the Savella faction, Nick Savella was the ruling boss, and his brother, Cork Savella, was kind of like his go-to guy. He didn't really have maybe you could call him consigliere, but I don't even know if I'd call him that. He was the brother of Frate, as they said on the wiretaps. Then he had an underboss, Tuppy DeLuna, and we wanted to focus on them. And during this time, we figured out Tuffy, the underboss, and Cork, because Nick never went out at night. He never hit the joints. You never saw him out at night. But Carl, or Cork, his brother, and Tuffy DeLuna, his underboss, they were out at night, and we caught them meeting at this one joint a lot. And then the Bureau, at the same time, they have an informant that they've turned, and he tells about a story about how this one table in this joint that we were seeing them at all the time, there's a lot of dirty conversation, and there were this thing going with these Spiro brothers, and the Spiros had the Savellas had killed the eldest Spiro brother in 1973, and the youngest had come back out of the penitentiary shortly after that, and he immediately started telling everybody he was putting together a gang and he was moving on the Savellas. And he was telling people he was recruiting Italians into it, what we call Peckerwoods, or what they call Peckerwood. Italian people in this city call non-Italians as Peckerwoods. They were recruiting even Peckerwoods and half Italians into it. and so if I found out about it, I interviewed a guy who said, yeah, he said, met with Carl Sparrow. We said, I'm putting together a crew. We're going to move on these favelas, and I've even got a joint that I'm buying into out here in 103rd and State Line. We're going to have a room to meet in, and it's like, putting together a little clubhouse and recruiting guys to be part of his gang. It was almost childish in a way, but yet it wasn't, because it was for real.
Right. Childish with murder and guns.
Really? Yes. So this starts going on. They start stalking each other, and informants are reporting this. We're seeing this. Mm-hmm. We're seeing, some of the Sparrow people driving around where the Savella people might be. We're seeing some of the Savella people driving around where the Sparrows might be. And so you're seeing this stalking. Informants are reporting the stalking, and the Bureau has an informant that turns and said a lot of that conversation about the murders of the Sparrows is taking place at the Villa Capri. And so we had all these surveillance reports that put them in the Villa Capri all the time. So that's probable cause there to get your microphone, right. Dirty conversations. They're there. You got different sources that say that they're there. You got a good informant that says they're having dirty conversations. Mm-hmm. So they put a microphone in there, and lo and behold, we don't hear anything about, I say we, the FBI was the ones that were monitoring the wiretaps. They don't hear anything about murdering the Sparrows, but they do hear about money coming out of Las Vegas. So now they spin off into a third thing. They get us all back together. They figured out what was going on, and to last the conversation, Tuffy said, I got to find a phone. So we know that, he's not using the phone there. He's not going to use it at home then. So he's got some phones out there that he feels safe at. So again, they get an airplane, they bring some agents in from out of town, they put more of us on that, and there's a full court press on Tuffy, and we follow him, we find the phones, and they throw wires on that, and then we go back to the Sparrow. So that was, that's kind of my part in that thing is helping out and not being, not being the guy that writes the reports and makes the cases and does all that. So that's what we do. And then we started following the Sparrows around and trying to catch some of the Savellas, trying to kill them, because they were a little easier to find, and there was all kinds of stuff going on. And that the Savellas, the Sparrows came up with a plot, and they were going to put a bomb under Tuffy's car, and we caught them in the act doing that, and recovered the bomb and arrested several of them. And then one of the Sparrows, either he blew himself up or the Savellas blew him up. Nobody really knows for sure. And then we focused on the final brother. There's only one brother left now. They'd had a big shootout at a tavern in the middle of all this too. Two of our guys were driving by just before the shootout happened. They got about 10 blocks away, and the call came out, shooting at the Virginia Tavern. Like, oh my God, we just drove by there.
Oh my gosh.
And so they run back down. There's Carl Sparrow laying out in the middle of the street, wounded. He was crippled, was in a wheelchair the rest of his life, but he never slowed down a little. They never slowed him down in his criminal endeavors until they blew him up. They blew that guy up. He was in his wheelchair. He had a little used car lot that what he was doing was selling drugs and fencing out of that used car lot, because we had by then we had an undercover and an informant. We're getting close to him, and we're making cases on him for this. But the mob, the Savella faction, was going to make their case on him, and they were on their way down there. Our undercover and our informant were on their way down there to meet with Carl about taking an order. Maybe he had some property for him. I don't remember which. They get a call, go back to the unit, sit tight. And at that time, they'd put a bomb underneath the shack that he had that blew him and his wheelchair clear out through the roof and dumped him down into the parking lot.
Oh my gosh.
Got some pictures of that wheelchair's all twisted up like pretzels laying in the parking lot with his body next to it. Friend of mine working bomb and arson told me later, he said, I looked down on the ground, I was working a scene, and we're looking around, and I see something that looks like a cigar laying there. I thought, what's that? He said, I've been over and I picked it up. And he said, well, it's not a cigar. And he said, it was like something rolled up. And he said, I unrolled it and there was a tattoo on it.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what people don't realize is you get all these stories, but it's we say, well, it's childishness, but honestly, that's what it is. It's like grown men that never grew up. They want what they want. They're going to do whatever it takes to get it. And if they have to kill you, they're going to do it. I'm like, just grow up already. Come on.
Really?
I don't understand the thought process for those kinds of things. But anyways, it's sad, but it's also one of those things where you're like, oh my gosh, how does that happen? Blow up your wheelchair too, but
today's episode is brought to you by Bones Coffee Company. You can forget about boring coffee when you drink Bones Coffee. Not only do they offer a variety of flavors such as strawberry cheesecake and maple bacon, they are a family-owned company that puts great detail not only in their coffee, but in the artwork that comes on each individual bag. Bones Coffee has a coffee club that will deliver your favorite coffee to your door every month. If that wasn't enough, they also have some amazing swag to offer. Check out Bones Coffee Company today. I'll have my affiliate links in the show notes for you.
So I want to ask you, and this may be one of those stupid questions, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Considering the fact that you're a local guy and you are not with the feds, you are with a local group, and they're pitching you up against all of this. Did you find it intimidating? Did you find it exciting? Was there ever a point where you're like, man, I'm in the wrong place because I don't have the tools I need? I mean, was there moments in time where you felt kind of freaked out because you're like, I'm in over my head?
Well, Synova, I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and probably not fully matured myself in many ways. And to me and the guys I worked with, it was just like playing cops and robbers with real guns. And that's the way we looked at it. It was a lot of fun. Sometimes you'd be able to follow somebody a lot longer than you ever thought you could. Sometimes and not get burned or not lose them, and then come across a sighting. Something that was like, damn, I never put those two guys together before. Or they go to a business and you see them going into a business and then you come back the next day or two and just pick up some tags around that business. You find, wait a minute, this is there's a lot of mob guys going to this business. What's going on here? And putting those kinds of things together, being able to maybe get an apartment and get some pictures that you never had before, some good pictures of some of these guys. And again, putting people together, that's a big part of working on the mob, is putting people together. And once you put them together, then when the Bureau gets going, they're more like a big, slow bulldozer, and we're more like a little kind of a weed whip running around, kind of doing this and doing that and then they'll come on through and just bulldoze everybody, but they move slow. Well, we can move fast, and we hear something, we'll run over there and check it out. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was great. You got at night, probably the most danger I was ever in. I did have them chase me once, and I just got away. As soon as if they'd have caught me, it was coming Spiro's people. They didn't know if I was a Savella hitman or what. They just knew I was, some guy sitting up there in a Chevy Nova watching them, and I saw them get all agitated, jump in their car and take off at a high rate of speed. And I was a couple blocks away, so I just took off myself. And next thing I know, that I can see them trying to catch up to me behind me going down the street. And I ran a red light, and they didn't run the red light. And I got to a freeway on-ramp, and I just hit that freeway on-ramp, and I never saw them again.
That's funny. The cop runs the red light, but the mobsters don't.
Right.
Like, I'm not afraid to run the red light, but I am.
And had they walked up on me some manner, all I had to do was just get my badge up there real quick, and they're gonna say, okay, they're gonna back off. I actually had that happen at a funeral. A guy now, a drug dealer named Michael Catu, and he was loosely connected. He would say he might be an associate of some mob guys, and so I went up to watch the funeral. He had an execution. It was a funny execution. He had it was dealing cocaine, and he also was dealing stolen property. And we knew that they'd made a case on whoever bought some stolen property from him, and they were working on him, and he had made the statement he wasn't going to jail again. And so, yeah, really, he shouldn't have ever said that out loud. But he's got a body shop as a business, and two guys come in one day and want to see the owner. He's sitting back in the office, and they go back in and just shoot him. And walk out, no theft or anything. So no doubt he was hit. So I go to the funeral to see who shows up. And there was one mob guy that showed up. Kind of interesting that he even showed up, but I figured they would. But this guy had a bunch of friends because he had been a fireman for a long time and had left the fire department. And I think these were all firemen, and firemen are kind of like policemen. They all stick together. So I see some guys come out of the funeral home, and I'm up and kind of up in the cemetery that surrounds it, just looking down, and they come flying up and they pin me in where I am with their cars, and they jump out, and I said, oh shit. So I'm grabbing my gun out one hand, I got it down below. I don't want them to see the gun until it's absolutely necessary, and get my badge. And as they run up, I just hold up the badge, say, oh, okay, all right. We just saw you driving through the lot and 2 or 3 times, and then you parked up here. We didn't know who you were. So, that's kind of how it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, because they have to make sure that you're not there to kill them.
Right.
Well, and people that may not think about it, but when someone says they're not going back to jail again, that's one of the most dangerous statements you can make in the mafia as a criminal of any sort, because the police are going to be wary of you. Your fellow criminals are going to be wary of you. They're like, what is this person going to do? Are they going to, that is one of the most dangerous statements you could make. I'm not going back.
That's for sure.
So, anyways, for sure. When you finally retired from law enforcement, now you write books and you make documentaries, and you did a podcast. You do a very well-received podcast called Gangland Wire. What got you into all that? What did you do first? Did you do books first, or what did you do first? Or do you know? Has it been too long?
Oh, well, I mean, the last 3 or 4 years I was on the police department, I had I'd gone back to the intelligence unit as a sergeant, and we got a commander in there, not my immediate commander, but the guy above him down at headquarters. And he wanted to get his own guy in as a sergeant. Now, sergeant in the intelligence unit is a highly desired job, because you get a car to go home back and forth in. It basically use your own. You can wear whatever you want to work, and you're in on all the cool stuff. And he had a guy he wanted to bring in as a sergeant. He bounced my ass out, and I didn't. And he did it. He didn't do it in a very kind manner. I don't know. I never did figure out what the deal was. He just went in and ordered my captain to bounce me out, which meant I didn't have a chance to go find a job at, the burglary sergeant or robbery sergeant or anywhere. And everybody, all the commanders, when that happened, they thought, well, hell, he must be about ready to be indicted or something. Why are they kicking him out? He's been in there all of his career practically. Yeah. Well, they kicking him out. There must be something wrong. So I go to dog watch and patrol. And that's in a way that I'm glad that happened, because it kind of opened my eyes to a different way of life. If I'd have stayed in the intelligence unit, hell, I might have stayed there for 35 years in the police department. And so in a way, it was all for the best, because I was out at dog watch and was dog watch desk sergeant. And then I ended up working, day shift sergeant, kind of overseeing some community policing things. So it kind of opened my mind up to different things. And during that time, I decided I wanted to go to law school. And I should have, there's kind of things a guy should have done when he's young, but I wasn't, I wasn't in control of myself enough to do the right thing back when I was 19 and 20 years old. So I went to law school, and I'm 3 years and graduated, and I practiced law for pretty hard for about 10 years just on my own. Well, during that time, as a lawyer working for yourself, I didn't have this big overload of cases. I was making some decent money, and used to say it's the highest paying part-time job I could find. And so I don't know, I got interested in making documentaries. I filmed my mom telling her life story, and I thought, and I got an editing program. This whole digital revolution has made people like you and me so powerful, and they given us a platform to really reach out worldwide. It's just amazing, and to do things that only huge, big, multi-million-dollar companies could do before.
Right.
So I was, my wife had iMovie in the time on her Mac, and I used iMovie, and I made this little documentary, my mom, and put pictures in it and music, and God, I thought, that's cool. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I did a few more little things like that for people, filming older people that I knew to tell their life story. And I just kind of developed my skills, and I did a volunteer deal for a free health clinic, telling their, the beginning of their genesis of the free health clinic. And they got it played on the local public TV station, and I thought, boy, this is cool, and that's how I got into making documentary movies, and that I just started making them.
It started with documentaries first before books.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to get into the mob. I did a couple on Civil War things, and that's when I did my first two books. They were kind of like companion pieces for my movie. I mean, as you know, and you've got people out there that are kind of in the biz and you coach people and help them with the business end of this thing. You've got to be multifaceted. You have to start searching for different streams of income. And I've never really tried to make any money out of it. I made enough money as a lawyer. I got a pension coming in. It's not really about making money. It's more about doing something, to kind of live up to my potential, which I never did when I was young. I don't know how many times I heard, Gary, you're just not living up to your potential. Yeah, I know, but it's too much work. I want to go drinking and partying.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, most humans don't live up to their potential. So there you go. Well, that's interesting, because I never knew how you did the documentaries. I thought the books came first, so that's pretty interesting. But you're right. There's a program that I took. I take all kinds of seminars and different things. I have some sort of attention deficit issue, and I told my daughter I could either make it a disability or a superpower. So I chose to make it a superpower. So I work on 6 projects at the same time instead of 1.
You're a woman after my own heart.
And then I can't focus enough on the basics of housekeeping and dishes and cooking and all those things. It just my brain just starts deteriorating in my head. So I'm listening to seminars while I'm scrubbing the floor. I'm listening to, but one of them was how to make 13 different streams of income off of your book. It started with a book, and then how to make 13 different streams of income. And that is so important. The days of writing a book, sending it off to some ghost publisher in the sky, and they're going to come back and you're, in a golden carriage and you're famous. It doesn't happen. This carriage is going to take you on a book signing around the world, and, it don't happen that way. So you definitely have to know how to. I called myself for a while. I've been trying to transition and do some different things, and so I was trying to figure out, well, what do I call myself? And I was like, I'm a multimedia specialist, and that's basically what you got to be. You do. You've got to know the basics of a website and the basics of a podcast and the basics of video editing. You got to do that to become something nowadays. We've got the tools available now. Which is amazing, because we didn't have anything like this. We couldn't even daydream about this stuff in the 80s, but then now we've got the tools, but you have to do so much more to get out there, because there's so much more competition. But so tell the people about your books now. So you've got, how many books do you have now?
What have I got? Three, I guess. The first one, I did this first movie was about what slave life was like in Missouri. And that was, I got a whole story on that. I put it up on YouTube just for free, because nobody really wanted to, they don't want to hear about that stuff particularly. Like a library, I did some screenings in libraries. I threw it up on YouTube, and all of a sudden it was up there for 5 years. And I made a YouTube channel just called, the title of it is Negroes to Hire, because that was a title, that was a caption on an ad in an old newspaper. People had extra slaves, would hire them out. And so it's called Negroes to Hire. And I threw it up on that YouTube channel, and I just sat there, and somebody, and people are hungry for this kind of history. They don't get this at all.
Right.
And every time I did a couple of library showings, and it would be filled with people, primarily Black people, because they said, thank you, because nobody ever tells this history. We want to pretend like it didn't happen. And all of a sudden, I started getting emails from the YouTube channel. People were commenting on it. Like, I get 10. I get another 10, I get another 5 and 10. Like, what the hell? So I started looking, and this little YouTube channel that had maybe, 50 subscribers now has almost 1,000 subscribers. And right now that thing's sitting at 220,000 views, and I'm not even sure why. So that's, but that was my first movie. And that was my first, just throwing it out there for somebody I just wanted people to see it. I want them to know that history. Uncomfortable as it is, I think they need to know that history.
That's the way I am. I'm like, you can't learn from something if you hide it. You can't learn from a mistake if you hide the mistake. You have to be open about the mistake, acknowledge the mistake, and continue on in a better way, and so that's kind of where I teach my children, and I homeschool my kids. Before it was mandatory with COVID, I homeschooled them before, because they have a little bit of my superpower issues. Let's just put it that way. And so, I teach them these things, and it's always one of those things where I'm like, okay, this is something that is very dark in our history, but you need to know it, and it's something that you need to learn. Once you know better, you need to do better, and but hiding it doesn't benefit anybody. And so it's nowadays with people looking for that, you just obviously hit on some kind of keyword that people were looking for, and then it started bringing in masses, and so it goes to show you never know which piece of your content on YouTube is going to really start bringing something in.
I know. That's why I told that story for people that think about are thinking about doing this kind of a thing. And I had another one on my. I just threw the audio from a guy that I interviewed named Michael DeLeonardo, and I knew it was kind of an halfway important mob guy back east, but and he wasn't all over the place being interviewed and all that. He really went in witness protection and stayed there. And I lucked into getting him to talk to me. I threw that one up, and I had the same thing happen with it. All of a sudden, I got like 60,000 views of this. And it wasn't even views, it was listens, because it was, I just put an image up there to put it up on YouTube. I didn't get that on my audio podcast. So that's another thing, is you kind of have to do both. You got to try, and I finally started trying to do both. I didn't do that for a long time because I didn't want to do the extra work to go to YouTube. But
I did the videos. When I was doing cold cases, I'm like, well, in reality, a cold case needs a blog post. It needs to be included in a book. It needs to be a YouTube video. It needs to be an audio, and so it needs all of those things. And then I even kind of pushed it farther, and I would take the pictures, and I would make a case file of pictures and post that on Pinterest. And so I would take one story, and you'd have 5 different avenues that you're telling the same thing. You're repurposing the content that you've already created 5 different ways, because you never know who's going to consume it in those manners. The key is to cross everything, weave everything together to where one will move them to the next thing, and to generate traffic. And so it's kind of one of those things that I teach my coaching clients when they want to write a book. It's so much more than the paperback. So you got one showing in your background. That one called Leaving Las Vegas. Is that the name of that one?
That's my Leaving Las Vegas. My first 2 were more like young adult historical fictions. I took a couple of Underground Railroad stories and
that's fun,
and put them out. It was fun, and people seem to like them. I don't sell a lot, because I'll tell you right now, as you know, when you're self-published, you eat what you kill.
Yep.
And even when if you go to a publisher, there's several publishers out here that will help you with this and sign you to a contract, and they'll take about 75% of what you're making.
Yep.
And I won't mention any names, but I've talked to a couple of them, and I know one guy got really mad at this particular company because he didn't think they were doing anything. Well, they don't do anything. They don't spend any money to promote your book. You got to sell it yourself, unless you're TJ English or you're Nick Pileggi or some of the names. Unless you've got a name like that, you got to sell it yourself, and then hope the content's good enough that then people will tell their friends about it, and it'll take off like that. And it's a pretty crowded space. It's getting more and more crowded. Just when I started, I was about the first one that did a mob podcast, or it'll be 6 years ago this April. I think I was the only. I had several people tell me they think I was the only one out there, and I think I was too, because I was looking around for them to kind of pony off. I want to do it, and I want to see how other people did it. I couldn't find anybody else that was doing it, so I just started bumbling my way into it.
Yeah.
But you gotta to do that. So Gangland Wire, I did the movie, the film, a documentary film called Gangland Wire, which I did the film before the podcast, and so I named the podcast after the film to kind of capitalize again on that. I wanted brand identification with Gangland Wire, which I finally have got it. You can find Gangland Wire pretty fast on the internet.
Yes.
And that book, after I got done with the movie, I believe I maybe even started on the next one, and that was a telling of the Civella-Spiro War. That Gangland Wire is just about the skimming from Las Vegas, and I had got copies of all the wiretaps that the FBI gathered and put in as evidence during the trials. So I made extensive use of the wiretaps in the movie and in the book, because what I did with the book, I wrote kind of the story. It's more, it's a pretty good police report form, really. It's not in real narrative form. My next book, maybe I can do that. I started writing and I don't know, I pooped out. But it's more police report form, but it tells the story. And then I tell it via the wiretaps after I tell how we got into the skimming from Vegas and how they uncovered it. And then so I take a pertinent section of a wiretap and I tell, this is what this means. And this is what the FBI did based on this, maybe. And so I now put some of the exact words from the transcript in the book. And then I have a Kindle version. And so I have the little audio clip from the actual wiretap. And if you click on the headline or the top of the transcript in the book, in the Kindle version, it takes you right to a website that holds the audio version, so you can hear the actual words. I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't quite take off and went like I wanted it to, but it's kind of plugging along.
You never know. One person hit it, and 4 years later, it might go crazy.
Really. I need Brad Pitt to get a hold of that book and say, "Oh man, this is great," and start tweeting about it or something.
Yes. I've decided I want Vin Diesel or Stallone, because I love their voices. I'm like, man, if they could do the intro to my podcast, that would be awesome.
There you go.
It's like, I need to go to Fiverr and find somebody that can mimic their voices.
I'll tell you what, they're out there. They're out there.
I'm like, man, I want to find somebody with a real gravelly voice. Of course, Stallone, he sounds like a mobster, but it's not on purpose. It's because half his face is frozen. But I'm like, he makes a great mafioso sound.
He does.
So if I ever get someone to narrate anything, that's who I want. But
really?
So you've got books now available for people to purchase. You've got your podcasts. You've got your documentaries. You do Patreon too, right?
No, I don't. I never did get into Patreon. I do Venmo, which is everybody. What I thought this through. And I'll tell you the truth, with Patreon, people are given every month, which is nice. If you get to a certain point, then you can maybe hire a lot more things done. It's anytime you expand a business, it's a decision. Do you want to invest more money in it? hire people to help get things done as you do more things for your customers. And I don't know, I'm kind of like trying to play more golf and do less work.
Exactly.
So I never did Patreon, but I did Venmo, because you got your phone in your hand when you're listening to your podcast, and you can just look down there in the show notes and say, oh yeah, Venmo, or now say Venmo me. And a lot of people have Venmo, and so that's worked out pretty good. And I've got a donation page with a donate button on it. I'll send copies of my movies as awards or rewards, however, depending on how much they give me, or a coffee cup or T-shirt or whatever. I got several different rewards for different levels of money that they give, and so that's kind of how I monetize it as much as I can.
So you have a way of even. They can sponsor you, basically. They can. Right. It's not a monthly membership like Patreon.
Right. I never did do that. I really work hard at connecting with people that are supporters that I realize through my Facebook that are, repeat supporters, and then people that have given me money. I do a Zoom call once a month I got a list of anybody that's given me, I don't remember what the amount is, but I think it's almost everybody that I've given money through PayPal, whether it's $5 or $100. I've just got an email list of it. And I, about once a month, I'll send out a link to a Zoom call, and we'll just, I'll maybe tell a story. I've had a guest or two on there, and or sometimes we just talk, and so that's kind of an advantage of that. So I really try to connect with all my people that are regular, steady listeners.
Right. So they have, if someone wanted to support you, they can support you through your podcast that way, or they can get your books on Amazon, or where can they find your documentaries?
Two of them are on Amazon, the Gangland Wire, and actually three of them, the Freedom Seekers, Stories from the Western Underground Railroad, Gangland Wire, and Brothers Against Brothers are on Amazon. I just finished one this last year. We do a mob film festival every year and kind of show some of the same movies over the weekend. And I've got 3 movies, and a friend of mine's got a 4th movie we put in about Kansas City mob and stuff. And I'll get maybe somebody to come and we'll do a panel discussion or 2 after the movies, let people ask questions. And so this last one was about a mob and a Pendergast, who was the political boss of Kansas City for a long time, really rigged an election for the president at the time, Harry Truman, against a particular congressman here in Kansas City. Truman did not want him to get reelected. And out of that, they exposed a lot of election fraud. They had one particular trial and convicted a mob guy of denying the right to vote to this woman, because he'd already voted for her. As she walked up to him and getting ready to vote, he said, "Don't worry about that, Ms. Carter. We already voted you." Another guy said, "Well, we're all Democrats here. Don't worry about it." Well, see, it was 2 Democrats. They were trying to primary a guy. 2 Democrats running, and the president didn't want the incumbent to get reelected. So Pendergast floated another Democrat to run against the incumbent and beat him in the primary, which he did. Of course, it was rigged like hell against him.
Right.
But a whole criminal case, and convicted the mob guy. She testified against him, and several other people went down behind this election theft, and then kind of what happened, the fallout from that. But you can't put a documentary or any kind of a movie up on Amazon anymore unless you have a theatrical release, or you have been in a major film festival, like for a documentary, like one of Eureka Springs. It's a pretty important documentary film festival. There's one in Columbia, Missouri called True False. That's an important one. Or of course, South by Southwest, or any of the biggies. There's a list of certain film festivals you have to be accepted by before you can get up on Amazon with your movies anymore. So that's kind of out. I figured out a way to rent it myself for $1.99. So if you want to go to my website and on the donate page, there's a way to rent any of my movies from there for $1.99.
Sweet. Always find a workaround. There's always one available.
It's a constant hustle, isn't it?
It is. It is. It is. It is. Well, so oh shoot. I've been writing down my questions as you talk, so I remember, and I forgot to write this one down. I remember. Do you still have the app? You had at one time, you even branched off into an app. Can you tell people about that?
I do. It's called the Kansas City Mob Tour app. I didn't code this thing myself, and to pay somebody to code it is a lot of money. But I stumbled onto a website, and there's several of them out there. The one that had the best reviews was something called Appy Pie. I think that's APPYPIE, I believe, or APPIEPIE. I'm not sure, but Appy Pie, and for $200 a year, they will host your app and throw it out to the app stores. And so it's out there, and then Apple will sell it for you, or Google Play Store will sell it for you, and you get a little piece of that action back. And when I first put it up there, it went great guns. Now it's slowed way down since. And I keep it up there. If I quit paying the $200 a month, I'm kind of hooked now. It probably end up costing me a little bit in the end if I keep it up there long enough. But I don't want to let people down that have already paid for it.
Right. And it's one of those things that when that's one of the breaks that being an indie. Because if you were in some kind of big company, the company would swallow that, but they would also swallow that along with probably 50 other apps that they've got going, So, but it's basically, that's kind of the way it goes when you're an indie. And I love the freedom of being an indie, though. I had a publishing house come back to me and offered to buy the reprint rights for 3 of my books. I gave them one, and I'm still waiting to see how they do. But the one they really wanted was the one that I make the most money on Amazon every month. And I'm like, no, if that starts to drop off, then I'll give them that one. But right now I'm like, no, I'm not going to give you my paycheck, because 2/3 of my paycheck right now is coming from 2 books. And so I'm like, and they wanted both of those. It's like, no. No way, but that feels good though, because as a writer, you spend sometimes years begging, pick me, and then they come to you begging you, pick me, and you're like, no, it feels wonderful.
It would. Yes, I agree.
So check out Gary's app, because we want to keep it going. So check out his app on the Google Play Store or the iTunes.
Actually, I can't explain it. I don't even try anymore. Google kicked me out, and I don't know why, but Apple's had it all along, so it's only on the Apple Store.
Okay, so on the Apple Store,
Kansas City Mob Tour.
Okay, so check out his books on Amazon. You can check out his videos. You can rent them off of his website, which is ganglandwire.com, right?
Right.
Website. You can check out his podcast. Is your podcast everywhere, or is it just on? It's everywhere. So check out Gangland Wire Podcast and his YouTube channel. I'll be sending some links in the show notes for this video. And is there anything else you want to chat about before we jump off?
Oh, I don't know. I can't think of anything. It's my second Zoom today, and I've got one. I'm doing a program tonight. First one of these I've done with the local library about that Savella Spiro Award. So I've got a PowerPoint all made up. And
good.
So that'll be my third Zoom today. I'm supposed to be retired.
So you're probably like me. I told you, I was like, you text me and said you were here or something. I was like, well, I'm making a pot of coffee first, and then I'll be there.
All right.
I'm on my second pot for the day. Of course, I only make half pots, so so I'm on my first full pot for the day. Just need to stick a straw on the top, and I'll be good.
Yeah,
so
I got you.
Well, thank you for coming on.
All right, Synova. Well, you're welcome.
I appreciate you.
You
have a good one.
You too. Bye.